of Salina, Saline County, and greater area. Surrounding counties are welcome. Everybody's welcome if you're not already affiliated with a branch of the League of Women Voters. We are approaching the 100th year of the organization. There will be more information out, and we need more members to help support some activities in the coming year. Today, we're moving right on to Kansas silver-haired legislature, because the real legislative session is just about to start on the 14th, I think. So we need to get serious.
Hi, I'm Anita Alton, and I'm the Saline County delegate, and I wanted to express my endeavor. It was one of those things where my class was having lunch on the 3rd floor of the Senior Citizen Center, and I came down and they said, "We don't have a delegate for Saline County." I go, "What do you mean a delegate?" And they proceeded to say that Saline County did not have a delegate. I said, "Well, I'll check it out." So I checked it out. It was completely outside of my box. I know nothing about the legislature, nothing about bills, nothing about the Commission on Aging. I had just retired. And so it's kind of like what I got to do then was get to know what my job was in Saline County. Not what Jay's job or Joan's job is, but my job in Saline County was to go to the senior center and talk to the constituents that are there and ask them their concerns, write it down, and kind of see what was going on. And if somebody was really interested in something, I would take their number, like Gary Schwarzenegger. I took his number so that I could call him and his other group in case I needed some opinions from the male side, you see. And so I found it was absolutely intriguing to go to Saline County senior centers and talk to these people, ask them what their concerns were and what they would like to see changed. And I heard from various people, which surprised me. They said, "Well, the last 2 people have never come down here and talked to us." So I was down there at least once a month for a great while to see what was going on in their thought processes and stuff. And I found that their concerns in Saline County were geared to medical expenses. And the other thing, the rare thing, in fact, I brought it up at our first caucus, was that the majority of them were very interested in wanting to process ongoing so that we could have the marijuana, medicinal marijuana thing. So this was kind of an inspiration to me that know that just because we were all over 60 did not mean that we were not up on a lot of the activities that were going on in the legislature. My first caucus meeting, when I met with them, everybody went around and introduced themselves and said what they were doing and this and that, and then I kept saying, "I'm a probie. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing here and what the crew does." So I have learned a lot in the last 2 years, thanks to Jay and Joanne, by the way. And I find that it's an ongoing organization that we advocate for those that are over 60. This means that right now there's about 500,000 of us that are over 60 in the state of Kansas. So if we don't get some of these things started and advocated for now, when it becomes more and more and more seniors, it will become very unpalatable to sponsor it and have the money be there. So at this time, that's kind of my story, and I went on to Topeka a couple times, but I have enjoyed the stint. I like going to the caucuses. The first caucus I went to, I presented medicinal marijuana, and it was well received in the group of 18, which I thought, oh, I'm going to be the downcast. I'm going to be the wild child, whatever. Wasn't there. I mean, they were all kind of, basically for it. But when we started that first caucus, there were like 26 issues that we could have advocated for. So you go through them, and we talk about them, which ones are more important, and which ones we think will get through the legislature if we help advocate. And the other part of my job is to email, call, text, whatever it takes when they're voting on certain subjects, bills that concern the over 60. Whether this means in the federal, to me, whether it was in the federal government or the Kansas government, that's what I would do. I like to do, as Jay found out, I like to talk and I like to be conversing and expressing. Yep. So that's kind of where I'm at.
And I am moving soon to Kansas City at the end of the month, so we need to find somebody to take my place. So if you know anybody in Ottawa County, so I'll just put that out there right first. But I think I've been coming for 3 years. I was trying to remember how long I've been doing this, and I've learned so much that it's so important that to go to every October we have our meeting in Topeka, and that's where we vote on our resolutions that we want to put forward to the legislature. And a couple of things I've learned when I think it was the first one I went to, we had a workshop on the population aging process in Kansas and how that's going. And it was a real eye-opener to see that this population in Kansas is just getting older and older, except for those counties like, or K-State or KUR. And we're really going to have to be aware of that and lobby for older people, because it's not just older people that need the help, it's their families, because it's the families that are going to be picking up the tab, like when we didn't expand Medicaid. That affected a lot of poor older people. And so it's really important to know that that's unique about Kansas. And so we're going to need to just stay focused on that. And kind of following from that is I also learned that the legislators need our help in educating them about these issues. They don't drill down, they don't have time, I'm not criticizing them, but some of the superficial, you know, like cutting, what was the Older Americans Act?
And Senior Care Act.
Senior Care Act, where they cut the funds for people staying at home. Well, the thing is, if people can't stay at home, they end up in a nursing home.
Right.
And I was looking on the internet today at the cost of nursing home in Kansas. It's like $6,000 a month.
Yeah.
And that's for $5,000 for a semi-private room.
Yeah.
$6,000 a month for a private one. So, and actually Kansas is a lot higher than a lot of other states.
Yeah.
I'm not sure why.
The coasts are always worse. But.
So, anyway, I just wanted to throw in what I've gotten out of this, and it's been, the people in Ottawa County, they're very interested in CAPERS being funded fully and cost of living increases. That's one thing I heard about. They also supported the medical marijuana.
Yep.
So, so that just kind of gives you an idea of how it's been for me and what I've gotten out of it. What a great organization I think it is. And anybody that wants to join us on any of these things, please do.
Yep. I'm Jay Rao. I'm from Beloit. I'm in my, I think, 7th year of Silver-Haired Legislature. This is my 4th year as president. And I had told everybody this would be my last time, because I feel like you need to keep leadership revolving around. I don't think you should get stuck with one person. And one of our problems that we had a very, and so our Solomon Valley Transportation, we take our senior bus, as it's called. It's not really, it's public transportation. But we take that and we fill it all the way down. We usually pick up a lady in Minneapolis, and we usually pick up 1 or 2 here in Salina. We picked up Joan and another lady from Ottawa County in Bennington, I believe, wasn't it?
Solomon.
Solomon?
At the dollar store.
Okay, and sometimes people in Abilene, but we fill that bus, and we go right up to the front door of the state capitol with 13 of us. And that's how she went first time. She wasn't even a delegate yet. And the one thing I noticed that is so good from both of them is how much you learn, and I cannot overstate that, how much we all learn by being a silver-haired legislator. We get so much more comfortable in talking with our actual Kansas legislators. That's what we do when we go down for Older Kansans Day. We go to their office and talk to them and explain, and just like they said, it is amazing to us how little our legislators actually know. And the example is the Senior Care Act, which is one of our main points, and it's one of our main successes, because we, 2 years ago, were able to get that reinstated. And not only is it $5,000 if they go to a nursing home, the average for Senior Care Act funds is $240 a month. And why the governor would cut a program which lets people stay in their own homes for $240 to be replaced by going to a nursing home for $5,000 as a head knocker. And so we fought very, very hard. We lobbied. We had news conferences in Topeka. We did a lot of things. And the next year, that was after the 2016 election, the legislators put that 31% cut back into the Senior Care Act budget. And he fortunately passed it. And I think he realized that even if he didn't, it was going to pass, override his veto anyway. So he signed it, and it's back in. That's the reason, though, at the time that we had our annual session this year, the Kansas election hadn't been held, and depending on which candidate won, if the other one would have won, his stated comments all year long was he wanted to go back and revisit those. So that's why that's in there. I don't know that it really has to be now, but it's already in there. So our bills, like she said, we had 26 this last year. We've had as many as around 32, is that right, Mel? Somewhere around in there. Our bills go through a multi-stage process to get to the point where we take them to the legislature. It starts, there's 11 PSAs, planning service agencies across the state. Ours is Manhattan. Each of those PSAs meet and they discuss what's important to that particular PSA. And then in July, the executive board, which are the chair from each of those PSAs plus all of the officers, I think there's around 15 of us or so, and we open it up to any of our other delegates. We've always had a really good turnout of our PSA 8, which is the Manhattan group. We've always had 4 or 5 of them that show up just to be in the audience and contribute. We let them be part of the discussion. They can't vote, but and we discuss all of those that are brought. And like I said, last year there was 26. And then from that 26, we try and whittle that down to a manageable amount that we can take to our delegates in Topeka at the annual session. In the past, several years ago, generally we took 3, maybe 4. That's been expanding every year. The last 2 years now, it's been 9, partly because some of those that were from previous years that didn't get passed by the Kansas legislature, we carry them along. Medical marijuana is one like that, and we had payday loans for several times. Medicaid expansion is a big one. When it gets to Topeka on Tuesday morning of our annual session, we divide up into 3 committees, and however many bills we have, we divide those into those 3 committees. We try and bring in speakers that are knowledgeable and an expert, and we aren't always successful, but we try and have them be able to talk on both sides. So like we might have somebody that's in favor of Medicaid expansion, and this year we also had a person that was not in favor. So that the committee people get a chance to hear, why aren't these people in favor? At that point, then that committee votes. If they vote to kill that bill, then it's done. It can't go any further. It can be brought up the following year, but it can't be talked about at that particular session. Those that pass, and this year they all did, then that goes to the full SHL delegation in the afternoon. And we meet in the House of Representatives chamber at the state capitol, and we have debates all over again. And people, the delegates, are allowed to come to the docket right in front, and they can explain why they are against it, why they are for it, whatever. We vote on each. People can then come back to the podium again and explain their vote. We always have several each time that want to explain why they voted a particular way. If it passes that Wednesday afternoon, then we come back the next morning. And the idea behind that is that most of us, not all, but most of us stay at the Ramada, and that gives them a chance to talk about this overnight. And then the next morning we come back and we debate again. The difference is we can have changes Wednesday afternoon. We can have amendments. We did have some this year. But what's discussed on Thursday morning, there can be no changes. It's an up or down vote. And this year, unlike most years, this year all 9 of them passed. So that is what normally our speaker will take to the Kansas legislature starting next week. His first task, he goes to the Department of Children and Seniors. And this year, the chair on the House side of that is Representative Susan Kincannon from Beloit, and a very, very close personal friend of ours. Sherry as well. Sherry knows her quite well. And he presents our agenda to them. Now that doesn't mean all of those bills are going to be in the Department of Children and Family, and in fact, the majority of them are not. But then Don has been just an unbelievable trooper. He spends about 4 days a week from mid-January until May when the legislature is done, going to committee hearings, testifying. I've been trying to help them out. I go to about 3 committee hearings a year where I testify. We also, several of us, we try and encourage whoever wants to come down to go to as many committee hearings as they can, just to be a presence. And we tell them, make sure you wear your name tag, and make sure that when the committee hearing is over, that you go up and thank them if they were supportive, and just not complain. We don't want that, but by the same token, to talk to those who aren't in favor to see if we can't persuade them. So that's the process we go through. Now, this particular year, and there's 2 versions. You've got the news release, but you've what I call the Cliff Notes version, and this was primarily for me, so I don't forget any of them. But R9 this year, 3601, and this was a carryover from the last several years, ever since the capers started really taking a lot of hits. We want Kansas to fully fund capers. Every single employee in the capers program pays 100% of their obligation every year without exception. Every single boss in the state of Kansas pays 100% of the employer contribution without exception. The state of Kansas was even below 65%. Worse, during the Governor Brownback administration, they deferred some payments. And they tried, as they did on a lot of things, they tried some accounting tricks to make it payable 10 years down the road or whatever. You're all aware of that. If you're in League of Women's Voters, I know that you follow on that. And by the way, I really appreciate what you guys do. I get this line of journal, and I appreciate the fact that you try and have legislative coffees, and that you try and have some discussions and debates. And I mean, I just think what you do is super. So, and I appreciate the fact that you've given us the opportunity to come talk to you. The second thing is, and it hasn't been as bad now the last couple of years, but we wanted to go on record to make the governor and the legislature aware of the fact that Capers is not a bank. Neither is KDOT. Neither one of them was intended to be a bank. And so that's what 3601 is, and we want to make sure that gets thought. 3602, a support for a cost of living adjustment. There has not been one in Kansas since 1999, 20 years ago. We are well aware that with the budget constraints that they're working with and trying to overcome the previous 8 years, that's probably not going to happen. We put it in there to just keep it in the back of their mind, to let them know that on down the road, we want this. And we're going to keep working on it, and we're going to keep you aware of it, and we want you to know we're watching. And so before we do a whole lot of obnoxious stuff, keep in mind this needs to be addressed. 3603, support for the expansion of Medicaid in Kansas. This has been a huge one. Like they said, 500,000 seniors in Kansas. But of that 500,000, somewhere between 16 and 20,000 are in that group that they are 60 to 64. They don't qualify for Medicare. In many cases, they don't have a job that gets them enough money to be able to support their own. Medicaid expansion would deal with that. And so we have really pushed for that. I've gone to hearings all over the state. Some of them are just beyond heart-jerking out. I mean, the lady from Wichita that has 2 kids, owned her own business, did not have health care because owning your own business has enough expenses as it is. So she took on a second job and hadn't been at that job 2 months, and she was diagnosed with cancer. And tried to keep up the second one, which meant she had to get rid of her business, which, you know, that's kind of a dream of theirs. And but because of all of the time she was going for treatments, she eventually lost her job, and so she had no medical insurance whatsoever. And as she said, I mean, we're talking the American dream here. We're talking people who are willing to work their butt off, and you're talking about just squashing them like a bug. The Salina lady that was working 2 jobs. She was in a restaurant business as a waitress. She also was a hairdresser. I don't know the name of the clinic here, but a doctor here in town, he was the one that spoke about it. She, as a waitress, one of her customers was a lady that worked at that gentleman's clinic. He smelled the cancer from her breast. That's how bad it was. It was an open wound. It took way over $200,000, and they got her in remission. Not a penny was coming back because she made too much to qualify, but not even close to get benefits, because while she was working 50-some hours a week, she wasn't working either one of them enough to get the benefits, which is more than common with an awful lot of businesses now. And there's just story after story after story like that Kansas is kicked in the tooth. I think I read the other day now, Kansas so far has given up $2.3 billion with a B of payment from the government, because the first 3 or 4 years they paid 100%. Now they'll pay 90%. Yes, more people come out, that's for sure. It's what's called the woodwork effect. If people come out of the woodwork. By the same token, when you talk to Louisiana, when you talk to Indiana, Indiana was the first group that I heard talk about it. They actually are making a profit with their Medicaid expansion, because for one thing, people aren't waiting until the situation's almost dire. And yes, they are still going to the emergency room, which they had hoped that wouldn't happen, but the emergency people can then schedule them at the clinic for the rest of their appointments instead of keep coming back. And to us, it's a no-brainer, and if I remember right, this year that was a unanimous 54-0, wasn't it? Something like that.
Probably.
Yeah, I mean, it was unanimous. And it's our 3rd or 4th year that we've been doing that. 3604 is a little bit like 3602. Kansas does have a pretty good rural transportation program. Our Mitchell County one called Solomon Valley Transportation. We are now combined with Jewell and Osborne County. When we started in 2011, we had 1 bus with 2 drivers. The bus was the big bus. We now have 16 buses with 17 drivers, and that doesn't count our dispatchers and our transit manager, and we go everywhere. We go to Nebraska because a lot of our northern people go to Grand Island for their VA, and we take people to a wedding out at Sharon Springs. We just go to a lot of places. And so this one is, we are comfortable with where they are. The 81 connection, we're so pleased with that. But what we're saying is, legislature, don't get complacent about our public transportation. We want to make sure that that stays in place. And so that's what that is. 3605 is huge. That was one of our big successes, as I said. We lobbied really, really hard to get that through. The full funding for the Senior Care Act for such things as fixing food and doing the laundry and vacuuming the floor and maybe going downtown to buy groceries and just all sorts of things like that. But with that minimum amount of money, that person can stay in their own home. And one of the things, when we talk about education, one of the things that I first learned when I became involved, the overwhelmingly vast majority of people would really like to stay in their own home. We are not against nursing homes, and we feel they have their place, but our philosophy is, as long as the person wants to, and here's a huge one, as long as they are capable, we want them to be able to do that. And then on down the road, when that becomes difficult for whatever reason, then you can go to the nursing home, whether it be assisted living, whatever, the apartments around. My mom's 92. She lives in one of the apartments in Norton that's hooked up. Like if she falls, she can push a button and they'll come right over. But she's still pretty much all by herself there. Still drives around Norton and gets along pretty well. And that's what we want them to be able to do, if they can and if they want to. This was a new one this last year, 3606, financial support for grandparents who choose to serve as legal guardians. It's a huge problem in West Virginia. It's a big problem all across the country where the opioid crisis is so bad, because so many parents have fallen into the trap where they really can't function and take care of their kids. And so, two options. They can go into the foster program, or a relative. Originally we said grandparents, and I think I wrote on there, yeah, that has now been expanded to include aunts and uncles and brothers and stuff like that. But it's a tough situation, and our thought was perhaps there's some grandparents out there that wouldn't mind doing it, but they're financially not capable. And so what we tried to push, and we were successful. Do you remember how much? Was it $3 million that we got through last year?
I don't remember.
I can't remember, but we were successful in getting about $3 million put into the program. And if you look at the news release, it tells the two Kansas legislators who fought very hard to get this done. Vicki Schmidt, who's now our insurance commissioner, and then a representative from Harvey County in News. But that's our thought, is let's pay them along the lines of the foster program. Not necessarily the same amount, because number one, you do have the love situation that you don't necessarily have in a foster program. But if we can pay them a little less, yet give them some support, maybe we'll have some more be able to step up to the plate. And so that's what's behind that. We did have a successful grandparents bill 5-6 years ago that dealt with grandparents' rights, in that in custody hearings, the courts have to include the grandparents in all notifications, so that the grandparent knew of a pending upcoming hearing and could go if they want to, could tell the judge, hey, we'd like to be involved with this. Now, that doesn't mean the court has to, but at least be aware of it, instead of finding out that, 5 days ago there was a hearing and my grandkid's now in Iowa. That's not right. That's not right at all. So, 3607, support for sports wagering in Kansas. The Supreme Court last summer said that not just Nevada and New Jersey could have sports wagering. Now, there's a lot of good with that and a lot of bad with that. And I'm a former teacher and coach at Beloit High, and I'm not necessarily strongly in favor of betting. By the same token, it's there. It's happening. It's happening everywhere all across the country. It's to our advantage if we regulate it, and if we get a little of that money from it in the form of revenue, just like the lottery. Now, how that's going to come about, I know there's going to be a bill pushed in the legislature this year. Not going to say it'll pass or not, I don't know. But whether that'll be regulated by the lottery, whether it's put into another group, I don't know. But I do know that we can have some control of that, or we can not have any control at all. And either way, it's going to happen. And so our solution is, let's get it in there, let's regulate it, and we'd like to say 100%, we'd settle for whatever percentage they want to give us, but let's let the proceeds of that go towards senior programs in Kansas, especially the Senior Care Act. Maybe instead of middling along at the same level for the last 13 years, maybe we can actually raise that, because we've got people on a waiting list. Have been there for quite a while. The waiting list over doubled when that was cut. Folks, those people need help, and they are going to go to a nursing home if they don't get that help. So, and like she said, that's extremely expensive. Further allowance of the use of medical cannabis. That was one of the big amendments that we had, because we've been calling it medical marijuana the whole time. We wanted to change that to medical cannabis, medicinal cannabis. Our original proposal was the non-THC. But the main thing is we want to get the foot in the door for people that need it. And in the article there, not on the Cliff Notes, but in the article, just some of the things that they have. the cancer people that are going through chemo, the people with seizure disorders. There's just several diseases, and in fact, when I talked at our Lions Club, one of the members that I know really well came up. His wife has been fighting Parkinson's for several years now. He said the only thing that controls her tremors is medical marijuana. You know what? I'm not sure somebody else should tell me what I need when that's the only thing that'll work. Because you've gone through the whole gamut by the time you get there. And let me give you a really good example. I think it was 3 years ago, they had several hearings down in Topeka on this. And of course, the lady from Johnson County, she's dead set against anything that starts with an M getting in through Kansas. But in the committee hearing, they had at that time a 3-year-old girl. And this was from the Journal, so probably several of you have already read that. She was averaging about 17 seizures a day. And the family had gone to Colorado, and they got her some form of medical marijuana, and they cut that to 3. And one of the legislators said to them, "Do you have any idea what medical marijuana does to a 3-year-old's brain?" And the attorney for the family looked him straight in the eye and said, "Do you have any idea what 17 seizures a day does to a 3-year-old brain?" And the guy just slumped down in his seat and never said another word. You know what? That guy has no business telling that family what's in the best interest of their 3-year-old daughter. Plain and simple. And again, it goes back to what they talk about educating these legislators, because they live in their ivory tower. They've all got sufficient income. It's not a big problem for them. They can go anywhere. What about just good old Johnny Joe public, you know? Let's be a little more reasonable. The last one we think this is new also, we think this is a no-brainer. And again, it came from a Supreme Court decision from last summer. Kansas right now is tied for the highest sales tax on food in the nation. We talked about, somebody said how the Kiplinger, I believe, does not have Kansas ranked very high for seniors. That's part of the reason. We're paying in many, many counties, Mitchell County being one, we're paying 8% on our food. The people in Mankato can drive 12 miles across the border to Superior, Nebraska and pay 0. Oklahoma, I'm not sure, I think it's like 3%, but they also don't pay anything on school supplies. Kansas, stick it to them. No, that's not right. Well, but the bad thing is, that brings in a lot of income for Kansas. So, we need to somehow supplement that if we take that away. Well, Supreme Court gave us that opportunity. And that last year, they said that we now can have internet sales companies charge sales tax. It's killing our local businesses. I can order it from Amazon, or I can go downtown. If I go downtown, right off the bat, there's an 8% increase. That's not fair to our brick and mortar people that keep our towns going. And so we said, okay, all right, yes indeed, we don't want sales tax on food, but let's replace it with a sales tax on internet sales. It's more fair, and it's a good replacement for the food. So that's what we are taking to the legislature. There's great news, and from my standpoint, and I know several others, they think it's great news too. For the first time, our agenda dovetails the governor almost 100%. You know, in the past, I mean, you know, Don Quixote with the windmills, and you were just hoping. But 2 years ago, we lots of times we might go 2, 3, 4 years before we get one to pass. 2 years ago, we got 3 of them through in 1 year. That was the year we also got the Senior Care Act. And that's what we're trying to do. Well, this year we're not having to go in and fight. We're going in to support. And that's what we want to do. And we will ask any of our silver-haired legislators, anybody can come testify. Any of you are welcome to. Anybody that has a dog in the fight, if you will. If it's something that you're passionate about and you've got some knowledge, you are more than welcome to testify. And that's what we do as silver-haired legislators. So,
So you don't have a paid lobbyist that you're
Nope.
strictly all volunteer?
everybody's volunteer. Every county gets one. The biggest counties, Shawnee, Johnson, Wyandotte, Sedgwick, I guess the 4, they get 5 more.
Oh.
And so that's why with Joan leaving, Ottawa County needs one. And then, like I said, area agency, we're allowed 2 for each county, and Saline County needs one for helping Nancy as well. And we stop and pick you up. You're more than welcome to ride with us wherever we go. Every time we go to our meetings, if it's southeast, we're going to stop, pick people up on the way. So, yes.
These resolutions you have here.
Yes.
Is there a
A
bill?
lot of years they are bills. What determines whether it's a resolution or a bill, if the legislature already has a bill, then we have it as a resolution to show we support that particular bill. The year that we got the Senior Care Act restoration through, there was no bill, and so we made it as a bill. And some years we'll have as many as over half of them will be bills. That just so happened this year, all of these look to have a bill that will be there, and so we're just showing support for that particular one.
Do you have to have a legislator enter your bill?
Yeah, you have to be lobbyists.
That's right. And so we try, and not necessarily just Don, if we know of a legislator that is along the same line of thinking, and we have a silver-haired person that's from that person's county and knows them quite well, then that's the person that'll try and dovetail that through. Yep.
Did the requirement of dropping legislators' names off of the bills?
We didn't make it as one of our plans, but we are highly in favor of that. It's too easy to fade into the woodwork, if you will. And hey, I don't know anything about it. Well, you're the one that put it in, dude. So, yeah.
So what is your funding? Who sets up the silver-headed legislator and
That's right.
legislature, and do other states also have this? And do
Right.
you have national conventions?
I believe we're down to 29. It's hard to get people to do it for free, especially in bigger states. I mean, you look at our person from Elkhart having to drive to Topeka. That's why I've moved several of our meetings here. At least that's in the center part of the state. We get no funding whatsoever. We charge our people that come to the convention $10. That's for our nursing scholarship. And then we accept donations. We do try and encourage our county commissioners, whoever, county councils on aging, to donate. Metro County is an example. We've given $300 each of the last 4 years. Occasionally you'll get one that'll go $500, but we've sent letters to the county commissioners, if you'll even donate $100, that would help us. We are, I mean, it's really, really tough, but in some states they do. I mean, there's nothing in the national charter that says they can't get funding from their legislature, but Kansas does not. And so we just trying to get the counties to do it. Unfortunately, other than one county, all of the counties that donate are the smaller counties. There's only one of the 10 biggest counties that donates any money at all.
How does the use of the actual state capitol building work?
We get that for free for a couple of reasons. One is the legislature gave us our charter, and we have to get permission of a legislator to serve as our sponsor. We have it in October, which is before the Kansas legislature convenes, which that helps considerably. We have our first day's meetings at the Ramada, and then our Wednesday and Thursday meetings are both at the legislature. And we try and copy it as much as we can, like the real one, as part of this learning situation that they were talking about. But we're just very fortunate that, and last year, the governor originally proposed that if you had a meal there, because we have a box lunch, Wednesday noon, that if you had over 10 people, they were going to charge you like $300.
Yeah.
We don't need that. Well, evidently a lot of people said, what are you trying to do? And sure enough, before we got down there, they had rescinded that, and so we still didn't have to pay. But I might mention on this Medicaid expansion, 2 years ago I testified, well, last year too, but 2 years ago I testified, and they had 3 days of hearings. One day for those who were in favor, one day for those who were against, and then one day for the panel themselves to do the discussing. The day that I was there in favor, there were 300, the room itself was totally full, 100 plus people. Out in the lobby with speakers set up was 300 more. I was one of 15 who testified. There were an additional 55 who sent in written testimony that's in a booklet, so you could read all of these. Overwhelming support. The next day, when that was for those against, there was 4. 3 of which were from out of state. The committee, because the chairman was not in favor, the committee that first time killed it. Now the second year, the committee passed it. It did go to the full legislature. Both the House and the Senate passed it. It went to the governor. He vetoed it. When it came back, the Senate overrode the veto, but the House lacked 3 votes of the, is it 67 or 75%? 67%, I think. So it was overwhelming majority, but they lacked 3% of having that. So that's what we work against. But, like I said, a lot of these keep coming back. So that's why this is the 4th year in a row, right, Ann? We're going to stick with it till we get something accomplished. So.
And I also wanted to let you guys know from Salina that all the legislators that are around Salina and representing Saline County have said to me, if you guys get a bill that's ready to go, bring it to me, I'll help sponsor it. And I think that's very, very good to know that the Salina group that are also thinking along the same terms as our senior citizens do, that they are willing to take on a bill that's already been looked at and investigated and debated already. So we have some very progressive people.
And thank you, Anita, Joan, and Jay. And